The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. Chapter 53. The March. Section 1. Part 1. Elias rubbed his forehead, trying to ward away the last vestiges of his hangover. The night in Bordertown had been perfect, even including the bar fight Anion had started, and aside from a minor incident after he had blacked out, he was ultimately pleased with the haul he had the Griffin smuggling back to Camelot. Anion was set to escort the families of the guards back, and in the floorboards of his wagons was case after case of illegal booze, as well as a few illegal narcotics they planned to experiment with under Scalpel's supervision. The after-party for the march was going to be interesting, if nothing else. The Human's Walk was in search of said unicorn, after they had been let free from the jail, in which nothing unusual at all happened. Elias had staggered his way back to camp just in time for the sun to rise. Preparations to the march were already well underway under the supervision of his Centurions, and while he had received strange looks, nobody mentioned his filthy, blood-spattered attire, nor the fact that he was the one late to roll call. The only pony waiting for him had been Granite, who had been carrying a whip, and a sad look on his face. Elias hadn't even bothered with a post. 10 lashes was light. Still, the whip left its sting on his back, and after getting dressed and collecting all of his gear, he had left the Legion just as they were beginning to get into marching formation to find Scalpel before he left with Anion and the families. Better to use the spells of a pony that wasn't coming on the march. He found Scalpel near the royal carriage, where Anion was helping the royal guards put on the top. The unicorn noticed him quickly, and smiled brightly as he trotted over. "Well, hey there, Elias. You're looking better than I thought you would." Elias shrugged his shoulders, wincing when the motion caused his armor to shift across the fresh lash marks on his back. "I think things went well last night, all things considering," he replied. "But I was hoping you still had that detox spell so I can shake this hangover. I'd like to be at my best." Scalpel's horn lit up, and Elias immediately felt all of his pains lessen, including those on his back. "And I'm sure the cuts from the whip weren't feeling too good either," Scalpel said. Elias felt slightly bashful as the ache on his back vanished. "How could you tell?" he muttered. "My good doctor always knows," Scalpel answered. "Besides, I heard Centurion Granite going at it." He let out a small sigh. "Of all the things your Legion does, whipping is one of the only things I absolutely don't understand. There are better ways of punishment, and studies prove—" "The people writing those studies can say all they want from the comfort of whatever office they write from," Elias interrupted. "My methods work, and until they don't, they'll stay. I'll talk about it no more." Scalpel sighed again. Fair enough, I guess." His horn's glow gradually diminished, and he smiled up at Elias. "I'm all done, Elias. Feeling better?" "Much." Elias looked at the carriage where Anion was fitting on the matte steel door. The Griffin fiddled with the hinges, tapping in them lightly with a small hammer. Elias counted to 100 once, then twice, and when he made it to 300, he cleared his throat aloud. "You do realize we're supposed to leave sometime this century, right? Perfection can't be rushed," Anion squawked. "Leave me be, or I'll tell the princess what we got up to yesterday." Luna slowly poked her head at the carriage doorway and squinted hard at Elias. "And what, pray tell, did you get up to?" Elias glared at Anion's back. "Yeah, Anion. Tell her about the bar fight that you started." The Griffin's wings immediately puffed up and covered his head. "Didn't start nothing," Anion muttered. "Unlike you, I have witnesses to the contrary," Elias said. "So maybe make less griping and finish up so you and Scalpel can get going. The walk to Camelot isn't getting any shorter." Anion continued to grumble to himself while Luna slowly withdrew into the shade of the carriage, still bearing her critical, squinting eyes. Scalpel, however, regarded Elias with a curious look. "What do you mean, Elias? I'm not going back to Camelot." An alarm bell rang hard and fast on Elias's head, but he ignored it, looking cautiously at the unicorn. You're staying with the garrison here, then? A smile fitted across Scalpel's muzzle. No, of course not. They have their own healers. I'm coming with you on the march. Suddenly, the noise of the preparations died away. Palpable tension bled into the air as Elias's brain worked hard to process the words that had just been thrown at him. It was the tone, mostly. Scalpel sounded so excited, happy, even. Elias closed his eyes and tilted his head, putting one hand on his sword belt while the other rubbed his chin. Mind running that by me again? I'm an officially recognized officer in the Global Healers Corps, Scalpel said. Elias cracked an eye and he found the unicorn motioning to a yellow plus sign on his saddlebags. Of course, I can't treat any active combatants, Scalpel continued. But I am the castle doctor, specifically for Princess Celestia and Princess Luna. Since I would have world-recognized immunity to harm, I thought it'd be safe to join them to make sure nothing bad happened. Just a precaution, of course. Immunity to harm? Elias echoed. Meaning? As long as I don't fight and to go anywhere near an active battlefield, it is illegal to even touch me, Scalpel explained. If anyone were to do so, or Celestia forbid, actually hurt me, they would have a bounty of 1 million bits put on their back, recognized by every nation under the sun. Ponies, griffins, diamond dogs, minotaurs, even changelings recognize the yellow cross. Didn't you ever wonder how I escaped from being put in a pod during the wedding? Elias looked towards the ground and closed his eyes again. Chrysalis usurped the princesses, and you got special treatment because of a healer's group? Her entire species would have been blacklisted from our help, Scalpel said. The Global Healers Corps has a few dozen doctors operating in the Badlands and... Elias held up a hand, and Unicorn fell silent. A switch flipped in the human's brain, and he felt rage building at a fiery rate. He struggled to keep the growing anger from his voice. I am assuming you have been part of this organization for some time. When Steel Scalpel didn't immediately answer, Elias's eyes opened and slowly raised to rest on the unicorn. The yellow pony's face told the depth of his realization, and he clearly didn't want to continue talking himself into a hole. It was far too late for that, however. I can tell that your answer is yes, Elias said. Which means you knew that you would come on this trip, and you decided to lie to my face anyway. Steel Scalpel's mouth flapped, and he just as to begin to figure out his words, Elias raised his pointer finger. For more than 6 months, I might add. It was for your own good, Scalpel said with a gulp. You needed a friend, and at the time you had turned everyone but me and Anyon away. I thought you wouldn't mind when you took on Snowball. Snowball was a lying parasitic spy! Elias spat, his anger finally boiling over. He tricked and lied his way into my legion, and what I did was all to earn a devout spy. I fed that leech to keep him playing for my team. And yet stopped working on the door and glanced back. You don't mean that, young blood. And he took a step off and let out a short huff. You're right, Anyon. Sorry. Snowball's been good to me, and I'm glad that he's my friend. His eyes fixed Scalpel where he stood. It's because he's been honest with me. He risked his life coming forward, but he stayed completely honest with me since, and because of that, he'll be one of my best friends until the day I die. Elias drew in a deep breath and straightened to his full height. He let the anger fall from his face, and drove as much of it from his tone as he could. He had to be cold and calculating, and despite a small cry of regret from the back of his head, Scalpel had been warned. Everyone else had broken his rules on occasion, but never as blatantly as this. And they never lied. They had always been upfront, had always said their exact feelings. Scalpel had lied, and he had been doing so for such a long time. Elias didn't want a liar for a friend. Doctor, I suggest you join your charges, I said, his tone short. and I suggest you stay well away from me from now on. Our friendship is ended on the grounds of betrayal. You betrayed my trust, and you are lucky I have so much self-control, because if I were a lesser man, you wouldn't be going on this march on account of a broken spine." Scalpel recoiled slightly, and Elias noticed a slight quiver of fear from the pony. Most present in the unicorn's eyes, however, was hurt. His words were viscerally hurting the pony on an emotional level. "Good," Elias thought. His eyes flicked to Anyon, who closed the carriage door and glanced back at the royal guard. The unicorn charged her horn, and the handle of the carriage began to glow. After a few moments, the unicorn's eyes rolled to the back of her head, and she collapsed, caught instantly by two of her fellows who had been lying in wait behind her. Anyon walked to the door and gave it a sharp knock. The handle turned, and soft touch stuck her head out.
"All well's in here, gentle Griff. The expansion spell's working perfectly, and every pony's getting comfortable."
Anyon gave a slight bow. "Give the princesses my regards." The griffin looked at Scalpel, who was still staring at Elias with an open mouth and teary eyes. Anyon let out a sigh and moved the unicorn's way. "Come on now, Doc. In you go," he said. "You should have known this was coming. Did you expect to get a hug?" Not waiting for an answer, Anyon used a wing to push and prod Scalpel to the carriage. The unicorn moved along with the griffin until he got to the carriage door. Then he seemed to recover his wits, and he stopped, planting his hooves and pushing Anyon away. His sorrowful look was replaced with one of anger, and he stomped towards Elias.
"No! Elias, I am your friend, and these past few months have been more than proven."
As soon as the pony came within striking distance, Elias backhanded him across the muzzle. The human had to suppress a flinch as Scalpel yelped like a beaten dog, and he fell into the dirt, clutching at his muzzle. Feather found her way into his hand, and the sound of steel leaving sheath vaguely touched Elias's ears. He didn't care as he laid the tip of the gladius next to Scalpel's terrified, quivering muzzle. Holding the unicorn's gaze, Elias made sure he had the look of absolute calm before speaking. "You don't listen well," he stated. "I just said to you to never come near me again, and threatened you with violence. Yet you came at me like I'm the type of man who breaks his word. But perhaps the mistake lies with me. Maybe I didn't make myself clear enough." Elias poked the blade forward, forcing Scalpel to lean back to avoid being pricked on the gladius's razor-sharp tip. "If you ever come near me again, if you even attempt to speak to me, I will make sure you shit teeth for the rest of your life. You will drink out of a straw, and you will shit teeth, and you will remember every painful second the face of the man you betrayed with your lies." His jaw tightened into a snarl. "I fucking warned you, Doctor. I gave you the same fucking rules as everyone else, and then gave you a pass because I thought you would be safe. But since you are so inclined to put yourself in danger, then congratulations, you've pissed me off. I can afford a 1,000,000-bit bounty, so do test me." "Young blood," a voice whispered next to him. Elias glanced to his right to find Anyon, his face calm but leaning concern into the air. His eye held the most of the emotion, and the solitary orb pleaded with him. A talon touched Elias' sword arm, applying a gentle amount of pressure. "It's all right, young blood. He gets it," the griffin continued. "He gets it. It's okay." The words, clearly meant to be calming, infuriated Elias, and he shrugged Anyon's hands off. "Is it?" Elias hissed. "Are you going to be telling me that you're joining the march too? Who else has been lying right to my face?" "I'm going back to Canterlot," Anyon said, again grabbing Elias' arm. "Just like I said I was. Got plenty of cargo to deliver, remember? We're going to be having a great big party to celebrate when you all get back." Anyon's eyes flicked down for a second. "Just put your sword away, young blood. You've made your point, and it's a good one. Don't doubt my support. It's over now, though, okay? Any more and you'll regret it forever. And I know you well enough to know you don't need that on your mind." Elias pondered the griffin's words, slowly running them through his mind. It didn't take him overly long to realize that the griffin was right. And by the time he had fully processed that fact, Feather again rested in her sheath, and he was walking away. He saw blades quickly vanish back into the sheaths from the surrounding royal guards, but he noted a lack of hostility amongst their gazes. Feigned or not, most seemed indifferent, while a few held sympathetic gazes, evenly split between Elias and Scalpel. The unicorn sniffled and cried softly, helped to his hooves by Anion, and escorted into the carriage by Soft Touch. Elias simply walked away from the scene without saying anything else. He silently lamented the goodbye he could no longer give Anion, but he decided the previous day in Bordertown was goodbye enough. He could always apologize if he saw the griffin again. He made his way towards the steadily gathering legionaries. The quartermaster was still doing their tallies, making sure the day's rations were distributed, making sure everybody had ammunition, making sure all of the tents were packed away with their additional equipment. Lines were forming, though, and while most of his officers were occupied, one seemed to appear from nowhere beside him. Elias didn't spare the white loveling a glance as they walked, silence reigning between them. A single question burned on Elias's mind, and he couldn't help but ask it. "Did you hear what I said?"
"I did."
The answer drew a sigh from Elias, and he closed his eyes for a moment. "I'm sorry. You're not a parasite. I didn't mean that." Snowball smiled and bumped his rump into Elias's hip.
"I know, General. You were angry with Dr. Scalpel. Justifiably so."
He glanced up to the human.
"Would you like my advice, or just a silent, supportive friend right now?"
Elias pondered the question for a long moment, then, closing his eyes, made a split-second decision. "A friend would be nice for now," he whispered. Snowball's tail curled around his leg, bitten easily by their armor, gear, and clothing.
"Then you have my support, Elias,"
Snowball whispered.
"Whenever you want to talk, about anything at all, I am here."
Elias considered remaining silent for all of the minute, but his mind still burned with anger, and he felt like there was only one way to alleviate the heat. He walked away from the column of ponies, making sure he and Snowball were just out of earshot. "Am I a liar?" he asked. "Have I built my reputation that I lie to those I care about? If you heard what I said, then you know how Scalpel reacted. Did I mislead him? Did I mislead everyone?"
"I don't think so,"
Snowball replied.
"Yes, you at times went back on your promises, but always for good reason, and you always resumed your promises right after. Every time I observed you, the pony who wanted to break the promise asked first. Scalpel didn't do that here. He lied right until the end."
"Observed." Eyes closed. "Scalpel was on your watch list. Did you know that he would pull this little stunt?"
"It was a possibility," Snowball admitted. "But none of his actions before today led me to believe that he would join us. I knew about his enrollment with the Global Healers Corps, but I thought that he would remain behind. While it is true that they receive protection due to their status as members, it doesn't mean that he's entirely safe. There have been multiple recordings of Healer Corps members being executed, specifically to prove a point about trespassing."
Elias closed his eyes. "I would have rathered have not known that."
"I'm sorry, but like you told Dr. Scalpel, you value me for my honesty."
Elias remained silent for a moment, doing his best not to further inspire a panic attack, then opened his eyes. "It ultimately doesn't matter," he said, his voice firming. "Dr. Scalpel made his choice, and if it kills him, then so be it. All we can do is make choices. I'm sure there has been more than one time that he has believed that my choices are foolish, but I pursued them anyway and was proven right. Pray that his belief in his little club is warranted." He glanced back to the row of armored ponies. "Could you fetch out a reminder for me? I'd like to see where we are in preparations."
Snowball nodded. "Of course, General." His tail held firm around Elias's leg for a second more, then the loveling pulled away, trotting away into the mass of ponies. Elias's eyes followed him until he disappeared,
Then the human let out a long sigh, idly combing over his gear to make sure he had everything. His ruck was loaded down with dried meat, as well as a day's water in his additional gear. A full load of pila set in his shield's sheath, and full sets of clothes filled out his pack, along with updated survival kit that included necessities like a small tarp, fire-starting materials, and a bulky flashlight. The only thing he wasn't carrying was his tent, which was supposed to share with some of his legionaries, and his spare pila, which were loaded into one of the wagons. The javelins were as sturdy as always, but they were different in the make than those of his legionaries used, and he didn't want to find himself in a situation where he ran out. If the march went as he believed it would, there was a very real possibility of that happening. Once his self-inspection was completed, Elias looked up, letting his eyes come over the gleaming rows of ponies. What families had tagged along were slowly being herded towards the small line of wagons heading back to Camelot under the escort of some friends Luna had gone into contact with. He didn't know much about the armored ponies. He had asked many questions when Luna had brought them up. The only note he had made when she spoke of them is that he didn't want them on the march. They were too great and unknown, and Luna had asked their leader, a pony with a false leg and a wispy mane, to escort the families home safely. While they were still in equestrian territory, the news that the majority of the guard was departing wasn't secret. So, a bit of visible protection was always welcome, even from some ragtag mercenaries. Anion led the way, shepherding wayward ponies towards the wagons, trying to get them moving. Tear-filled goodbyes filled the air around the more difficult ponies, but eventually the one-eyed griffin was able to get them into the wagon. Elias watched the crying ponies impassively. He even felt a twinge of irritation as his gaze flicked skyward. With the trio of princes locking up the last of their magic, Susty had assigned her student, Twilight, along with a team of powerful unicorns to raise and lower the sun and moon while they were departed. Because of this, the sun was rising, albeit slower than usual. It was another magical discussion that had largely gone over his head. So long as his subordinates understood that they could simplify the risks and dangers, all was well. Said subordinates appeared from the crowds of ponies and trotted towards him, their tails waggling with barely contained excitement. The sight made Elias sigh, but he was glad that most ponies were so easy to read. His ability to pick up on the little things had only grown with time, and these days he noticed it all. What the differences in tail height meant, all the different types of tail wagging and rump waggling, the little ear flicks, the wide range of dramatic emotion on a pony's face could hold. An expression flashed in his mind at Scalpel's hurt expression. The wideness in his eyes, the little tears that crept in as he stared into Elias's soul, the way his yellow fur flattened, the leftover of a long, unused instinct to not get eaten, the way his ears folded back, emphasizing the way his muzzle curled into the beginnings of a whimper. The utter flatness of his tail, the lack of movement. Elias knew that if the pony had been standing, that tail would have been tucked firmly between his legs. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of pure sadness. Elias let out a long sigh, and did his best to drive the image away. He wouldn't care. He wouldn't let himself care. Not about a pony who had broken his word. Scalpel deserved what he had received. It was only fair. The justification didn't help him keep the image of the heartbroken pony away. Bookbinder wisely kept a smile from her face as she came trotting up, loaded down under the weight of her pack, stuffed to the brim with her administrative supplies.
"Your legionaries are ready to go, General,"
she said.
"And I've already talked with our engineers. Tonight's cash should be set up efficient and easy."
A piece of paper levitated into one of the pouches on Elias's belt.
"That,"
Bookbinder explained as his questioning glare,
"is your tet assignment, since you apparently lost the first one I gave you."
"Or I just like sleeping outside," Elias countered.
"In a jail cell, more like,"
Snowball grumbled. Elias's eyes flicked to the loveling, then he cocked his head just a slight warning. Snowball immediately shrank, saying nothing. Bookbinder sighed and shook her head.
"Guess we couldn't get off at a good start. Auditor Snowball, go double-check your rations. Make sure we're not missing anything."
The loveling nodded and darted away, eager to be from beneath Elias's critical eyes. The human looked back to Bookbinder, whose grin returned.
"Don't worry, General. Mama Binder is firmly locked up today. She can yell at you for getting in a bar fight later.
Elias immediately looked up to see the fleeing white backside, noticing briefly the flap and waggle of Snowball's tail. He growled. "That little rat." Bookbinder giggled.
Believe it or not, it was General Nightshade who told us. Your little Escapades were the talk of the royal guards, and since she's sleeping with their general, she's privy to their rumors. Amongst your legionaries, however, your party has been well received, and has gotten several notes asking if you'd be free for a night in the town when we get back.
Her gaze softened.
I also heard what happened with Scalpel, and I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. I'm sure Snowball has already offered, but I am here if you need to talk with some pony.
Elias frowned and continued staring at the column. "That won't be necessary, Auditor. Especially since I don't want to make a repeat of that little falling out." An eye flicked down, meeting the unicorn's gaze. "Am I clear?" Bookbinder nodded slowly.
Of course, General. My offer still stands open nonetheless.
Elias looked up once more.
"Good. Let's get things moving, shall we?"
With Bookbinder and Night Flash at his side, they moved to the line of the Legion wagons, making sure that all of their food, water, and other special equipment was accounted for. Since his Legion had brought most of their equipment from Canterlot, retrieving the remaining wagons full of provisions had taken little time or supervision, giving Elias the opportunity to take his first optional break in months. While he had spent the night in Border Town, Bookbinder had overseen the sorting and packing of supply wagons with Night Flash. Both ponies had shown little interest in the diving into dirty, crime-ridden city, and had welcomed an excuse not to take leave. By the time the trio were done expecting the wagons, the army was formed up. Elias sent his scouts to the front, and after a brief exchange and communique between himself and General Chaser, the column began its arduous trek. As they left Border Town and approached the tall trees that marked the beginning of the Minotaur territory, they marched in the same order they had left Canterlot in. Since the princesses had neglected to assign the overall commanders of the march, they had to work with each other as equals in everything, and though most of his plans held a voting majority, Elias hadn't managed to convince Midnight Chaser on his marching order. Apparently even Nightshade couldn't pierce the pride of the Royal Guard, because even the suggestion that the Legionary scouts acted as vanguard was met by stern refusal. Chaser refused to let anyone but his own lead the army, and so they marched in parade order, with what Elias knew was a weak formation. Having the strongest elements of the army up front and rear wouldn't have been a thing if they hadn't placed their precious cargo in the form of 3 valuable alicorns in the center. A single precise strike could panic the center of the column, snatch away all 3 princesses, and disappear before either the Legion or the Royal Guard could respond. Elias tried not to let that fact bother him as they marched. He remained near the wagons, content to let his Centurions drift about to gauge the overall morale of the Legion. Every hour or so, one would drift by him, giving him a report on the boredom that was rampant. But otherwise, there was nothing wrong. The Legion's mood was hopeful, excited even. To the ponies, they were embarking on a grand adventure, despite the peril they faced. The excitement had even inspired a song, one that had lasted for nearly an hour. Perhaps it was the length of the song, but somewhere around the half-hour mark, Elias caught himself humming along. Once he had realized, he had found that he couldn't stop. Anytime he tried, his throat caught like it wanted to speak for him. Something told him that if he opened his mouth, however, something much worse than humming would happen. So he kept his mouth shut, and he continued humming. He hummed when Snowball buzzed to his side, singing his heart out, and he hummed when Night Flash and Bookbinder joined them. The ponies clearly noticed his slight addition to the musical number, and while they were smart enough not to bring attention to it, aside from what they were forced to by magical harmony, he knew that Luna would have been doing everything in her power to draw a song out of him. And when the song began coming to a close, Elias made a silent promise to himself that he would die before he was ever caught singing. The bout of magical harmony finally finished just as they reached the forest edge, and even Elias found himself slightly intimidated at the massive wall of trees. Fingers scratching the sky wasn't an apt enough metaphor to describe the trees. The massive evergreens were more like thick talons, their tops tearing the green swath in a bright blue sky. Had there been any clouds, Elias imagined the tree tops would have cleaved them apart as well. A wide, clearly marked road continued into the trees, and the column didn't slow its march as it walked into the shade of the forest. Day became twilight as the pines did their best to block out the sun, and as he crossed the borderline, Elias immediately felt eyes on his back. He looked around, looking for any spies, but he found nothing amongst the trees. The forest was merely quiet, with only the sounds of distant bird calls and the marching of feet to break the silence. The feeling of being watched lasted the entire length of the quiet march. The sun rose and then began to set as they walked to their first predetermined Castra site. The maps of the Saudi Arabian trade road were well marked, so Elias, Scarlet, and a few of the Legion engineers had already planned out where they would stop each night, evenly spreading out the massive distance they had to walk. They would march at a brutal pace by human standards, but a rather moderate pace by pony standards. Each day would consist of 25 miles, marched over 8 hours, ending the day early to set up the Castra. A Castra that only his troops knew how to set up. It was the duty of each guard force to gather their own water, firewood, and to arrange their own latrines and tents. On top of these duties, the legionaries had to cut down trees to build the Castra walls, dig the trenches around the camp, and then construct the walls and the temporary watchtowers at each corner of the camp. Additionally, the Legion's engineer had to lay out the interior tent layout of the Castra, ensuring all the guard forces were placing their tents properly. The seemingly massive workload would have been worrying to anyone else, but Elias knew that his legionaries were prepared. During their specialized training sessions, the pony had become quite adept at constructing Castra from top to bottom. Their record was just shy of an hour. Even by adding in tasks like water retrieval, Elias imagined that it would take his legionaries much more than 2 hours to finish their day's work. This week is going to be TCP week, so expect 3 or 4 more episodes of TCP before we move back on to the regular schedule of Your Human You, Quiet Rune Scribe, and DMM. We'll see how that goes. But we are now in the march, fully into it. Everything we've been building up to this moment. This is it. We are here. At the start, of course, but I mean, it's crazy to think that the entire fic has been building up to this, and we're finally here. And I hope you guys agree. Who do agree because they love TCP just as much as I do on my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Angel Boof, Dreamless Portal, Hyperlink, Nine Game, Lost Nebula, Michael McDonald, Redeemer of Dark, CH, HKH4, Jason, Lord I, Macario, Pony Entertainment, and Julius Costa Peters. My tier 2s, Captain Blue Shadow, 212th Trooper, Andrew Ingram, Chaotic Mist, Cloud Zaza, Danish Dash, Jay the Firewolf, DJ Mac 2000, Elemental Wolf, Soul Eclipse, Weeboo, David M. Coleman, Dioxetine, Mackenzie McColes, G-Man 121 Garza, H1 Wolf, King Can Panzer, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Nobody, Nocturne, Rocky 2522, Sticks, Potato 20, Saint Conk, Riani Dragon Wolf, Sword Brother and Mordred, Volio Cod and a new one, Max Garbanzo. I believe I'm saying that Garbanzo? Yeah, Garbanzo. I believe I'm saying that correctly. And of course, a big thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. And a large thank you to my current ones, Mr. Eclipse and Silent Titan. I appreciate your guys' support so much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.